Good morning. Today we're moving into Chapter 9, which examines professions and professionalization. Let me start with a question. What do you think of when you hear someone say, "She's a real pro"? Most likely you assume she's a highly competent worker who knows what she's doing and gets things done correctly. But the term professional can have different meanings. Sometimes it simply refers to someone who gets paid for their work, as opposed to an amateur who does something for the love of it. Other times, amateur suggests incompetence. That was a pretty amateurish job. These everyday uses of the terms do not accurately capture what makes professions distinct from other occupations. Today we'll go beyond these common perceptions to examine how professions differ from other occupations, how they've achieved their special status, and the ways this special status is being challenged by forces in our economy and society. Everyone seems to know that certain workers, doctors and lawyers, belong to a special occupational category labeled professional. Decades ago, sociologists began developing theories about what made professions distinct from other occupational forms. Their approach resembled the work of zoologists who study animals by noting their key anatomical features. This became known as the trait or attributes approach because it identified characteristics that seemed absent or less developed in other occupations. So let me walk you through the key attributes that emerge from this approach. First, professional practice is based on specialized knowledge. This isn't just accumulated job-specific information or experience-based rules of thumbs. As Herbert Simone noted, professionals cannot be satisfied with knowledge that is intuitive, informal, and cookbooky. Professional knowledge must be deeper, more sophisticated, and grounded in well-established theories that give intellectual coherence to specific facts and procedures. However, it's important that this knowledge not be too specialized. A professional with only general knowledge isn't much better than a layperson, but when knowledge is too narrow, it can be acquired through short, focused training, more like a technician than a professional. The work of professionals is deemed to be of great value both to society and to individuals. Every society needs attorneys and judges to interpret and administer the law, making it possible to settle disputes without violence. At the individual level, someone facing a lawsuit needs expert representation, while the injured party wants fair compensation. Because professionals' distinctive roles and specialized skills confer considerable power, it's crucial that this power not be abused. Professionals must put aside their own interest and prioritize their clients' and society's needs. Unlike commercial relationships, where caveat emptor, let the buyer beware, applies, professional relationships follow credat emptor, let the buyer trust. These elevated ethical standards are embodied in codes of ethics, the most famous being the Hippocratic Oath for physicians. These codes define key professional values and provide guidance for practitioners. Violations can result in expulsion from the profession, as when lawyers are disbarred for unethical conduct. These ethical standards also apply to interactions with other professionals. Competition for clients is frowned upon, and public criticism of fellow professionals is avoided unless it serves a higher good. Relationships are supposed to be cooperative, governed by commonly accepted standards of professional practice. The attributes I've described draw heavily from established professions like medicine and law. Things get more complicated when we consider other occupations. Engineers, Teachers, librarians, and social workers also claim professional status because their occupations exhibit some characteristics of established professions, or all characteristics but in weaker form. These are sometimes called semi-professions. The boundaries between professional, semi-professional, and paraprofessional are not absolute categories with firm boundaries. They're better seen as occupying a multidimensional continuum where boundaries are often indistinct. Are accountants best described as professionals or semi-professionals? Are laboratory technicians semi-professionals or paraprofessionals? Social workers occupy uncertain territory. They often have Masters of Social Work degrees after a bachelor's degree, but much of their training is practical rather than grounded in theory. They also lack autonomy since most are not free to practice if they see fit, but are embedded in a network of rules imposed by politicians and government officials. Lying well below established professions on income and status scales are occupations collectively known as paraprofessionals. Dental hygienists, paralegals, teachers' aides can be counted among paraprofessionals. Their primary task is assisting professionals, particularly doing the quote, dirty work that professionals try to avoid. Sometimes this work is literally dirty, like hospital orderlies, but it mostly consists of routine activities essential to professional organizations, like paralegals preparing standardized legal documents. Higher education provides another example. Most professors don't enjoy grading student exams, so this work gets delegated to graduate student teaching assistants, where it supposedly contributes to learning how to be professors. Paraprofessionals reveal another aspect of professions, that occupational status can result from what we might call discourse, through which practitioners convince government officials and the public that they occupy a special niche with requisite professional characteristics, whether or not they actually do. While occupations often labeled as semi-professions do not always meet the criteria we discuss, more may be involved than just failing these tests. You may have noticed that except for engineers, all the occupations I mentioned have large numbers of female practitioners, a pattern that holds for many occupations with ambiguous professional status. This makes recognition particularly difficult when, quote, women's work is often assumed to be less valuable than men's work. The virtues associated with women, compassion, self-sacrifice, nurturance, aren't the sort of things associated with autonomous actions and authority exercise. Female-dominated occupations face an uphill battle achieving recognition as full-scale professions. Another impediment is the social position of their clientele. Occupational prestige is influenced by the kinds of people you serve. One reason stockbrokers rank higher than insurance agents. Many semi-professions involve working with clients from lower class levels, like poor people served by social workers or children taught by elementary teachers. Finally, some occupations do involve performing dirty work, tasks that are necessary but unpleasant, dangerous, or stigmatized. This association with dirty work can prevent occupations from achieving full professional status. During the 1950s and 60s, sociologists identified common processes through occupations achieved professional status. The process began with creating a full-time, distinctive occupation, like when surgery ceased to being a sideline performed by barbers. Around this time, occupations get titles that delineate their exclusive domain. Ophthalmology, for example, came to signify the domain of medical doctors uniquely qualified to treat eye disorders. Professions also get solidified through forming national associations. These organizations become crucial vehicles for advancing professional interest and maintaining standards. They provide a unified voice for the occupation and help coordinate efforts to achieve recognition and protect professional territory. The process continues with establishing specialized educational institutions for training future practitioners. This is perhaps the most crucial step because it allows the profession to control who enters and how they are prepared. Professional associations are prominent in developing and adopting codes of ethics to govern members' behavior. These codes serve multiple purposes. They establish standards for practice, provide guidance for ethical decision making, and help distinguish professionals from ordinary workers. Finally, professionals and their associations engage in political mobilization to gain popular and legal support for the profession's distinctive niche. This involves lobbying for licensing laws, influencing education requirements, and building public recognition of the profession's value. By the 1970s, however, sociologists became increasingly skeptical about both the checklist approach and conventional descriptions of professionalization. Critics point out that many professions hadn't emerged according to these schemes, and earlier studies failed to account for how particular historical circumstances affected individualized professions' emergence. Most importantly, they failed to give sufficient attention to the political processes through which occupations gained prestige, autonomy, and other advantages. This brings us to a crucial insight. Professionalism is fundamentally about control. The most salient aspect of a profession is practitioners' ability to control the most important aspects of their work. This comes down to determining three key things. First, who is allowed to do the work? In full-fledged professions, this authority resides exclusively within the profession itself. Physicians, backed by civil and criminal law, exercise monopolies on the most important components of medical care. This hasn't gone unchallenged. Midwives, chiropractors, and nurse practitioners have sought legal rights to treat conditions and perform procedures, resulting in occasional turf battles. Second, how people are treated or prepared to do the work. Professions control entry through prescribed training that can only occur in institutions overseen by profession members. Third, who gets to evaluate their performance? Professionals maintain the ability to police themselves with sanctions ranging from professional censure to expulsion from the profession. Maintaining professional exclusivity often depends on enlisting state powers to enact and enforce laws restricting certain work activities to one occupational group, whose special status is recognized through member licensure. Professions are the only groups with licensing requirements. You'll find them for barbers, beauticians, private detectives, and collection agents. Licensing is defended as protecting the public by preventing unqualified workers from causing damage through incompetence. There's merit to this. Most of us gain comfort knowing that people updating our home wiring have state certification. But as Robert Rothman notes, licensing is probably the most important victory in the elevation of a profession because it grants the profession exclusive jurisdiction supported by the authority of the state. This exclusive jurisdiction restricts competition by limiting who can legally do certain work. The result is likely higher prices for service buyers and higher incomes for service providers. Professionals also have an additional weapon, prescribed means of entering the profession through institutions overseen by profession members. Today, attendance at profession-accredited institutions is virtually mandatory, whereas in the past, aspiring lawyers or doctors could learn through self-study and apprenticeship. The discussion so far may suggest that professionals control most aspects of their working lives, but we must consider a basic fact. Most of today's professionals work within organizational settings that potentially limit professional autonomy. This isn't new. College professors and clergy have almost always been organizational employees. But until well into the 20th century, lawyers and doctors typically worked as solo practitioners or small partnerships, hanging out a shingle to notify the world they were in business. Today, self-employment hasn't vanished, but many professionals work in organizations. 38% of physicians are not full or part owners of their practice, and large numbers of attorneys work in firms with dozens or hundreds of practitioners or are directly employed by large organizations. Outside medicine and law, virtually every other profession has emerged in conjunction with large-scale organizations. Since autonomy is a major professional attribute, being an organizational employee potentially subjects professionals to rules and regulations and puts them in subordinate positions within hierarchical structures. These alleged threats to professional autonomy shouldn't be exaggerated. Most professionals continue exercising considerable authority and discretion. Hospital administrators don't tell doctors what medications to prescribe, and deans don't interfere with professors' grading policies. It's also important not to overstate solo practitioner freedom. Independent professionals were often engaged in constant struggles to attract and retain clients, making them inclined to do what clients wanted, even if it went against their professional judgment. Being a solo practitioner guarantees no autonomous action. The ability of professionals to control markets for their services is the most important determinant of professional autonomy, much more important than being self-employed versus organizationally employed. The market control, rather than employment status, determines professional power and independence. Engineers provide an interesting case of an occupation embodying many professional elements while being firmly embedded in organizational matrices. They undergo lengthy training, imparting specialized and theoretical knowledge, and have considerable work leeway, but usually aren't involved in choosing projects, allocating resources, or making plans. Professions' ability to distinguish themselves from the other occupations reached its peak in the mid-20th century. Sociologist Talcott Parsons characterized the professional complex as the most important single component in the structure of modern societies, displacing both the state and capitalistic organization. This assessment had credibility when Parsons wrote it, but it's less likely to hold true today. If professions resulted for particular historical circumstances, the process can run in reverse as established professions lose spatial status in the occupational hierarchy. The issue of deprofessionalization has been contentious. Some observers say reports of professions' death are greatly exaggerated, while others note many external and internal threats. Let's consider threats on two levels: those affecting professions as a whole and those affecting individual practitioners' working lives. The most notable example of an entire profession losing prestige comes from the prototype profession, the clergy. The word professional stems from professing religious vows. Religious practitioners merit inclusion among established professions, but their status has declined due to eroded intellectual hegemony as rival belief sources compete. Surplus ministers resulting in low salaries and sexual abuse scandals undercut moral authority. Nowhere have challenges to professional autonomy been more evident in medicine. The oversight of physicians by non-professionals is an inevitable consequence of medical economics. Federal, state, and local governments pay for nearly half of all medical expenditures, while private insurers cover much of the rest. These agencies have strong interest in holding down medical costs, and most medical practitioners must accept payments that adhere to fee schedules they've set. This represents a significant shift in power away from physicians' traditional autonomy in setting their own fees. Government support has affected the medical profession in less direct ways as well. Medical schools rely heavily on grants from the federal government, which has used this power of the purse to influence medical education. The government has pushed medical schools to increase the number of students, to provide care for underserved communities, and create more opportunities for women and minorities. While this has increased diversity, it's produced a more competitive environment by expanding the number of practitioners. The federal government also has attempted to stem skyrocketing medical costs by encouraging production of more primary care physicians and slowing the growth of specialists. This is done through Medicare payment adjustments, increasing payments for primary care and reducing them for specialists. Private health maintenance organizations and managed care organizations have reinforced this by limiting access to expensive specialized care, giving gatekeeping functions to primary care physicians. The government-physician relationship has essentially been inverted. In the past, governments conferred legal rights to control medical practice through licensing. Today, heavy government involvement in healthcare financing and cost control efforts have created relationships that border on adversarial. Meanwhile, non-government organizations like private insurers, HMOs, and for-profit hospitals pursue their own interests that can put them at odds with the medical profession. Although we've analyzed professions in terms of their essential qualities and their relationships with society, the social origins of individuals occupying professional positions have certainly been relevant to professional status. To put it concretely, until quite recently, the great majority of doctors, lawyers, and other well-recognized professionals were white men of Northern European background. Professions also have been disproportionately staffed by individuals born into upper class and upper middle class families, many headed by professionals themselves. Class origin significantly influenced decisions to become lawyers and succeed in law school, while substantial percentages of practicing physicians are sons and daughters of doctors. This close identification of professions with dominant social groups has been a significant source of professional status and authority. This situation has changed to some extent in recent years, but taken as a whole, the professions still do not reflect the racial, ethnic, and gender composition of the U.S. as a whole. Regarding gender diversity, the legal profession has seen the greatest influx of women. 32.4% of lawyers were women in 2009. This would have greatly troubled Supreme Court Justice Bradley, who in 1872 asserted that the natural and proper timidity and delicacy which belongs to the female sex evidently unfits it for many of the occupations of civil life. Women now comprise 32.5% of physicians, though they're disproportionately represented in low-income specialties like pediatrics, psychiatry, and public health. While women have gained representation in established professions, many female professionals work in organizational settings where their professional autonomy may be limited. Occupations like librarians, elementary teachers, and social workers. Racial and ethnic minorities have made smaller inroads. In 2009, African Americans accounted for only 4.5% of lawyers and 5.7% of physicians. For Latinas, the percentages were 2.8 and 6.3 respectively. The underrepresentation of women and minority group members reflects the continued importance of ascribed characteristics for the occupational structure and the workers who inhabit it. Today, we've explored how professions have distinguished themselves from other occupations through specialized knowledge, ethical codes, autonomy, and control over their domains. We've seen how the checklist approach evolved into understanding professionalization as fundamentally about power and control. We've also examined current challenges to professional status, from technological change and increased competition to government oversight and changing demographics. The established professions that reached their peak in the mid-20th century now face pressures that may diminish their special status. As you consider your future careers, are you pursuing a field that's moving toward or away from professional status? How might technology and social changes affect the autonomy and authority of your occupation? What role will diversity and inclusion play in reshaping professional